Good morning. So I wanted to talk to you guys about raising my daughters while my husband, their father, was in prison. So I'd say when my oldest daughter was more affected by the situation with her father being in prison, uh, we started steadily visiting him when she was probably 4 or 5 years old. Never missed a visit. You know, she was in grade school. Uh, it was a lot on her. It takes a lot of hours to plan your weekend and go, drive far away, 4, 5, 6 hours for a visit and then turn around and come back. And so she didn't have the playing outside with her friends and going over to her friends' birthday parties and stuff because we had to go visit. She had a pretty good relationship with him while we were visiting. At times he showed some jealousy towards her. He didn't like the fact that I'd buy her new dresses or new shoes or whatever. He thought that she didn't need that. She was too young. But he tried to offer advice from a fatherly view, but it wasn't always the best advice. But I raised my oldest daughter, to be very strong, very understanding, and know that because he was my husband, that I had to provide for him and show him respect, and that I expected that of her. She never disrespected him in prison. As my daughter got older, I believe she was around 10, she came out to me as being gay or a lesbian. And at the time, it has never really affected me. I don't judge her any kind of different way. She knew what she wanted. She was very adamant about it. She didn't want to wear girl clothes anymore. She wanted to dress down, so to say, and I supported that. Then when she was 10 and a half is when I had my youngest daughter. She, we visited. She was a baby. She didn't really catch on to all of this. And I left when my youngest daughter was 2, almost 2 and a half, and my oldest daughter was 12 and a half. And we came across country from California to Iowa. It was tough on my oldest daughter, by her being lesbian and by her being biracial and coming to a place where it wasn't so much of a mixed culture here. Yeah, there's people of color here, but it wasn't the same as in California. The vibe is different. The way you talk, the way you move, all of that is different. You come to the Midwest and everything stops. It slows down. There's nothing happening, after 8 o'clock that is legal, And so learning to be a kid again or being a young adult, it was difficult for her. She had a lot of mental issues, and she dealt with them for a long time. She still deals with them. But I have to say that when I was raising her, I raised her more as my friend. She respected me. I mean, the mothering was there. I didn't let her disrespect me. She understood. I taught her, things about the streets and about different watching your areas, watching who's around you, knowing a way to escape, listening to conversations that are around you so that if anything was to jump off, she knew how to get out of that situation and get to a safe place. I did that. I had to do that because of the dangerous lifestyle that we were involved with. My youngest daughter was 2.5 when we came here, and she spent the first years with my mom, who was in her 60s by that time, late 60s, and my mom took care of her. My mom taught her. They spent the day together because I worked and my other daughter went to school. And we stayed at my mom's house for, I think, the first year that we were here in a bedroom. We had our own bedroom with me and my 2 kids, and my mom had her room. We all got along. I mean, we have a great relationship, all of us. As my younger daughter started to go to school, she had, from the time she was in kindergarten up until she graduated high school, she had a group of friends, and most 6 or 7 of them, they were all biracial children. Usually it was the mother was white and the father was black. So she didn't have so much of that culture shock that my oldest daughter did. During these years as I was bringing them up, I still communicated with my husband. I just couldn't live with him. He wasn't really rehabilitated in prison. He came out with a syndrome that everybody owed him. It didn't matter that he had been gone for, nearly 18 years off and on. He still felt like the streets owed him. People he knew owed him. Everybody owed him. So he didn't really have the mindset to be in a family situation with us that I thought he had when we were in prison or when he was in prison. So I still communicated with him. I never forced my children to, your dad's on the phone, you have to talk to him. I gave them the choice. We did a lot of talking about who he was, what his past was, what he was doing now with his life, those sort of things. I didn't lie. I'm a very real person and believe that if you give a child the truth, then they can form their own opinion at whatever age. So I never forced them. And for the majority of the time, he never wanted to talk to them. Even if one of my daughters answered the phone, he couldn't tell the difference between my voice and my daughter's voices. So it was usually he just wanted to talk to me. As I said previously, that man was highly addicted to me. And it was always, he needed me to bring my family back home, but I knew the situation. I wasn't going to put my kids in that because at this stage in his life, he thought it was cool that he had Section 8 and he had an apartment and, 5 TVs and things like that. He thought that was life altering. It was great for him, I thought he should have had a job and he should have been sending money to my kids. He didn't have to send it to me. He could have sent it to my kids. That didn't happen. So, I did the best I could and supported my children, whatever they needed, wanted, whatever. I did it. And I didn't have animosity to him because I still had love for this man. I just knew we couldn't live together. So as my kids got older, I don't think that they ever got to the point that there was resentment when they were teenagers and into their 20s. There's no resentment. They knew who he was. If they felt like talking to him, they would. It wasn't no sweat off their whatever, their back. And like my youngest one daughter says to me all the time, I knew who he was, but what was he going to contribute to me? The advice he would offer, I was already getting that from my mom. They would say to me, Mom, you carried us on your back all this time. He's not helped us. We don't hate him, but he just isn't there. So, luckily, my youngest daughter actually has a couple brothers. One is a junior to my husband, and he's, I don't know, 6, 7 years older than my youngest daughter, and he keeps up with her. He looks out for her, talks to her. They communicate. My oldest daughter, who has a different biological father, she has 7 or 8 brothers and sisters. And she communicates with some of them. I actually took her out there, or sent her out there when she was in her 20s, to go meet her brothers and sisters and her father, her biological father, which didn't go well for her. But she understood. She came back to Iowa. She was married. She got married, and was with this woman for 10 years, and has had my 2 grandchildren by artificial insemination. So my daughter has a daughter and a son, and they're well. They're 7 and 5, and she's a great parent. She still deals with some mental issues, but she's a great parent. And she went through a narcissistic marriage for 10 years, but all said and done, she's gotten out of that relationship. She has sole custody of her kids. She raises them. She still lets the former wife interact with them, but she's a very strong woman. She's in her 30s, and she's doing well for herself. My youngest daughter, who's now 24, she lives alone. She has her own place, and she actually lives next door to me. She helps me. I'm older. I'm in my 60s, and she helps me. She goes to the grocery store for me, helps me with the laundry and cleaning the house and things like that. I've had like 7 back surgeries and getting ready to have another one this year. So in the last 5 years, I've had 7. So she's a great help. When she was in her 17, 18, 19 years, yeah, we lived together, and it was a struggle. We had knocked down dragouts, but it was because I believe she has a very strong mind, and she challenged everything, and she used the reverse psychology on me. And it gets to a point as a parent, you've taught them what they need to know, and you can continue to encourage them to grow their mind and grow their own opinions. And there are going to be times where you got to argue a point with them so that they can see where you're coming from. They can see another point of view from whoever. You can quote books, magazines, news, whatever, but I have never stopped growing with my children. I would never say you're grown enough to do this on your own, because I feel like once you're a parent, you're there for life. So if they need you or they want you or whatever, you got to be there, period, point blank. And I think that the overall thing I'm trying to get to is that, yes, not every father, whether he's incarcerated or not incarcerated, has the same idea about what fatherhood is. I don't think that we can, as humans, blame that person per se. What I think we can blame a lot of the lack of fatherhood in this country is the lack of education that society allows a father to get or have or desire. Because some circumstances it's the economy. They can't see it or get a job that is enough to provide for their family, which makes them inadequate, per se. Or they got a couple baby mamas that ain't supportive of them, whatsoever. Or might just be that they don't know how to be a father. So I think society overall, from probably the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they took away parts of what being a man was. Because if you go back in the 50s and 60s, a man was usually the sole provider for their family, period. And the women stayed home. But now society is a mama usually, or a lot of times, has to be the provider, has to be the disciplinary person, has to be the one that stays there with the kids. And it's difficult to work a full-time job, stay home with your children, and provide and cook, clean, and everything else. So I think, for me as a woman, what I thought was the most important was putting food on your table, having a place to live for your children, and educating them, and continue to educate them. I raised my girls to know that you can do it on your own if you need be, but don't ever shut the door on love, period. Because love can also grow you as a person. So, you asked me, Joe, how my kids felt about their dad. They loved him. He's passed now. He passed in November. But they loved him and they understood him. And I believe they forgave him for not being there 100%. But they knew where his mindset was. So, no excuse. I think a man should always be there for his kids, period. So, take care.